Young and the Restless next week. Sharon falls apart and Kyle's ego explodes. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is having a nice day. Before we begin the video, please subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. In the upcoming week of The Young and the Restless, viewers can expect emotional turmoil and power plays to take center stage. Sharon Newman, portrayed by Sharon Case, finds herself spiraling mentally. She wakes up in disarray, so she questions her own reality. Kyle Abbott, played by Michael Mueller, faces accusations of ego-driven decisions. And Summer Newman, played by Allison Lanier, struggles with feelings of professional insecurity and jealousy. Meanwhile, Victor Newman, brought to life by Eric Braeden, continues his manipulative games. And he gives his son Adam Newman, portrayed by Mark Grossman, control of Newman Media. But this move doesn't go unnoticed by the rest of the Newman family on Young and the Restless. Particularly Victoria Newman, Amelia Heinel, and Nikki Newman, Melody Thomas Scott. They voice their concerns and displeasure about Victor's decision on the CBS opera. As the week progresses, tensions continue to rise, and Audra Charles, portrayed by Zuleika Silver, becomes more entangled in the professional and personal drama. The Newman family has apprehension about the future, and Sharon's deteriorating mental health promise a week filled with suspense, intrigue, and high-stakes drama. Get all your daily Young and the Restless spoilers and news here at, and stay tuned for updates on your favorite characters' fates. The Young and the Restless, featuring Sharon's breakdown and Kyle's growing ego, filled with high drama, emotional turmoil, and explosive confrontations. The Young and the Restless next week. Sharon falls apart and Kyle's ego explodes. Chapter 1. Cracks beneath the surface. The sun barely peeked over Genoa City when Sharon Newman stood outside Crimson Lights, staring into the distance. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her coffee mug, the warmth doing little to ease the chill creeping up her spine. For weeks, she had felt herself unraveling, small moments of forgetfulness, flashes of past trauma creeping in at unexpected times. She thought she had everything under control, but control was slipping through her fingers. Inside the coffee house, Nick Newman noticed her hesitation at the door. He watched as she hesitated before stepping in. Something was off. "Sharon," he called softly, walking over. "Are you okay?" Sharon snapped out of her thoughts, forcing a smile. "Of course, just a long night." Nick wasn't convinced. "You sure?" Before Sharon could answer, a loud, self-important voice cut through the morning calm. Kyle Abbott. He strolled in like he owned the place, throwing his keys on the counter and flashing a cocky grin at the barista. Ever since taking over at Chabot, his ego had grown to unbearable levels. "Sharon, my usual, extra strong, CEO life is exhausting." Nick rolled his eyes. "Kyle, you run a cosmetics company, not a war zone." Kyle smirked. "Funny, because the battles I fight are just as intense." He turned to Sharon, still expecting his coffee. But Sharon stood frozen, staring blankly at the machine. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the wrong buttons, steam hissing wildly as the espresso overfilled. "Sharon?" Nick reached out as her breathing grew shallow. "Hey, look at me." But Sharon barely heard him. Her mind had taken her somewhere else, somewhere dark. Somewhere she couldn't escape. Chapter 2. Kyle's downfall begins. Meanwhile, across town at Jabot, Kyle was basking in his newfound power. His father, Jack Abbott, had given him more control, and Kyle was enjoying every second of it. Except not everyone at Jabot was thrilled. Audra Charles leaned against his office doorway, arms crossed. "You're enjoying this a little too much, don't you think?" Kyle smirked. "What's the point of power if you don't wield it?" Audra arched an eyebrow. "Just don't get too comfortable, Kyle. CEOs fall just as quickly as they rise." Kyle scoffed. "Not me." But Audra wasn't the only one noticing Kyle's inflated ego. Over at Chancellor Winters, Summer Newman sat across from Lily Winters, scrolling through an article on her phone. "Can you believe this?" Summer scoffed, showing Lily the headline. "Kyle Abbott declares Jabba's future is in his hands." Lily smirked. "That's a bold claim." Summer exhaled. "Yeah, too bad it's going to come crashing down on him soon." Because if Kyle thought he was untouchable, he was in for a rude awakening. Chapter 3. Sharon's Breaking Point. Back at Crimson Lights, Sharon sat in the back office, trying to calm her racing heart. Nick knelt beside her. "Sharon, talk to me." Tears welled in her eyes as she finally whispered, "I'm losing it, Nick." Nick's stomach twisted. "You're not losing anything, but you need help." Sharon wiped at her eyes. "I thought I was okay, but lately it feels like everything is slipping away." Nick took her hand. "Then let's figure this out, together." But Sharon wasn't sure if she could be fixed this time. Chapter 4. Kyle's Ego Explodes. That evening at Society, Kyle arrived dressed to impress, walking in like he owned the room. He had called a meeting with several Jabot executives, expecting them to shower him with praise. Instead, he got blindsided. Jack was already at the table, arms crossed. "Kyle, sit down." Kyle frowned. "Dad, what's going on?" Jack slid a folder across the table. "These are the reports from your last quarter in charge." Kyle flipped through them, his confidence wavering. Numbers weren't as strong as he thought. "You've been making rash decisions," Jack continued, ignoring key advice. "Jabot isn't a toy, Kyle." Kyle clenched his jaw. "I've been doing exactly what this company needs. If you can't see that, maybe you are the problem." Jack's face darkened. "Careful, son." Audra, watching from the bar, smirked. Kyle had just dug himself into a very deep hole. And the worst part? He didn't even realize it yet. Chapter 5. Sharon's Shocking Confession. Back at the Newman Ranch, Nikki sat across from Sharon, studying her carefully. "Nick told me what happened," Nikki said gently. "Sweetheart, I know you don't want to hear this, but you need support." Sharon exhaled shakily. "I don't even know what's wrong with me, Nikki. Her voice broke. "I feel like I'm falling apart." Nikki reached out, gripping her hand. "Then we catch you." Just then, Faith walked in. "Mom?" Sharon wiped her tears. "Hey, baby." Faith sat beside her. "Please tell us how to help." Sharon hesitated. Then finally, she whispered, "I think I need professional help." It was the hardest thing she had ever admitted. But saying it out loud, that was the first step to healing. Chapter 6. Kyle's Humiliation. The next morning, Kyle stormed into Jabot, ready to prove he was still in charge. But when he walked into the conference room, his world shattered. Jack stood at the head of the table. "Kyle, after serious discussion with the board, we're demoting you." Kyle froze. "What?" "You've made reckless decisions," Jack said. "Jabot needs stability. We're placing you in a different role." Kyle's face burned with humiliation as Summer walked in, arms crossed, smirking. "You really thought you were untouchable, didn't you?" she murmured. Kyle clenched his fists. "You did this." "No, Kyle, you did this to yourself." And for the first time, Kyle Abbott's ego finally cracked. Chapter 7. A New Beginning for Sharon. The next afternoon, Sharon sat outside Crimson Lights, watching the world move around her.